future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Got to crack that whip. Greetings and salutations, everyone. You have tuned into Dr. Judy WTF, which, of course, is What the Freud here at UBN Radio Network, which is right here in the heart of Hollywood at the Sunset Gower Studios. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, and, of course, we have Dr. Judy Rosenberg here. She's the founder of the Psychological Healing Center in Sherman Oaks and Beverly Hills, and now the creator of, and everybody with an iPhone has got to grab it right now, at the Psychological Healing Center app on iPhones. So what you need to do is go to your app store on iPhones, and it's free, and download it. So now you can pick up all the goodies and all the stuff and stay in touch with us here at Dr. Judy WTF. Or you can write us at info at Dr. Judy WTF as well. We are a call-in show, and we're going to continue our series on parenting tonight. Because, as I said last week, raising parents is really hard work.
Sure is.
Yeah. And in addition to Dr. Judy's favorite phrase, okay, it's mine, childhood is a hostage situation.
I always let you say that line.
I know.
That is so your line.
Actually, it's your line, but I love it. And
we share it.
We're going to shrink a tune later, and it's going to be a fun song by, who are we doing? Who did we pick? Leanne Womack. So stay
Very
tuned
pretty
for
song,
that. It is a
actually.
great song.
Yeah.
It'll work.
So I just wanted
Since
to
we had somebody that wanted us to do Cats in the Cradle, and we've done it twice.
No, I think we're done with
we've,
that one.
We're also on iTunes. So if you want to go to iTunes and YouTube, and you can pull our shows on YouTube and be a subscriber, and then you'll be alerted when we pull our next shows up.
And there are plenty of goodies on the app. You can find out more about the Psychological Healing Center, and of course, you can tune right into Dr. Judy WTF right through the app. And I believe we are going to, or already have for sure the mind map is up there, so you can have that right at your fingertip access.
Yes.
Just in case you fall into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns, you can then use the picture literally to be the cause of better outcomes of your life. And the other aspect of the app is, I don't know if it's already on there, if tech support got it on there, but we will have the peaceful healing dialogue.
It's a preview of coming attractions.
Right.
Why don't you elaborate a little bit on the mind map for those of you that haven't tuned in, and we haven't really talked about it in the last couple shows.
Okay. So the mind map is a system for healing human disconnect. And what I mean by human disconnect is all the wounds of childhood. And the wounds of childhood are basically ways that we disconnect from our mothers and our fathers, and what disconnects us is physical abuse, obviously, sexual abuse, neglect, and smothering. So any form of that kind of disconnect will be wounding to our psyche. And out of that, what happens? Do you have a picture of that up on the screen?
Actually, for those of you listening, you can actually go to drjudywtf.com, and then you can pull it up on there. So I do, for those that are listening here, you can check it out. There it is.
And you can pull it off of the app, too, because it's up there.
And it's on the app, so therefore,
Right.
got to download the app.
Right. So the mind map is a pathway to healing, and it's divided into the top half, which is how we're wounded, and how that wound encodes into our self-esteem, into a horrible core belief, something like I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable, or I'm stupid, or some such negative conclusion that we formulate based on the way we're treated. And then the middle part of the mind map is the present, and how it causes chaos in our lives, and how it forces us to defend ourselves. And some common defense mechanisms we've talked about, of course, are alcohol and isolating and using food is a defense, and shopping
Drugs.
is a defense, any kind of drug.
Yeah.
So anything could be used as a defense. And then what happens with defense mechanisms is they break down, and then in the process they break us down. So the middle part of the process is how to dismantle that horrible time bomb, which is the negative core belief. And then the last part of it is the future part, how to encode into health. So how to paradigm shift out of that darkness and reconnect to ourselves, our significant others, and the community at large, heal and reboot and create a better relationship to ourselves and the world at large.
The three levels that Judy talked about are actually the first level of the three is your past. And you alluded to the second is your present. And then, of course, if you don't address with those, you won't have much of a future.
Right, exactly. And it's all explained.
Yeah, it is. It's in the book as well. Yep, indeed. Be the cause, healing human disconnect, which is actually the byline of our show as well. We feel that Judy and I feel that we as individuals, we as couples, as lovers, as spouses, as families, as even employees and beyond, are more disconnected than ever. And it's really funny, but I say this to people all the time, and they always know that the most guilty thing is our cell phone.
Absolutely, and we think we're connecting, but we are connecting to people over there, but sometimes what happens is we disconnect from the person right in front of our eyes, and that is very injurious. And I will just repeat an experiment that I've done with people in my practice. What I will do to show them the concept of disconnect is I will actually be talking to them and then interrupt it with looking at my cell phone and watching them and having them experience the human disconnect and the painful effects of that, which is usually they lose their train of thought, they get very stressed out, and they start going into a state of confusion. And so we're doing this on a mass basis. And tonight's show is a continuation of parenting. So it's really about how to prevent disconnection from happening to begin with. And as many of you know, I base a lot of my thinking and a lot of my treatment on Dr. John Bowlby's attachment theory. And tonight we're going to talk about parenting, attachment parenting, the good and the bad of it, because there are some articles out there that talk to mothers who stress out over attachment parenting, which is not the point.
And one of the guiltiest issues in that regard is daycare. So we're going to touch on that.
We're going to touch on that. And so basically I want to reiterate that in order to form a healthy human psyche, babies, infants need eye contact, skin contact, consistency. They need a mother that soothes the baby, attunes to the baby. They need consistency, and obviously they can't be abused in any way. Okay, goes without saying, neglected or smothered. Smothering is a topic that I think we covered, but
we have had a show in the past called Smother Mothers.
Right, so tune into that one.
Yes.
There's so many episodes out there. So if you're watching this one, know that there are about 100 and some odd more.
Over 100,
and we are in the process now of transcribing our shows, and these shows will be available in the form of an ebook in the near future.
Oh, we're going to put a book
So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, parenting is a really, really important topic because if we parented correctly, if we gave our children the narcissistic supplies, i.e. the emotional goodies that they need to be healthy, then we wouldn't have the symptoms of human disconnect, the overeating, the drug use, the sexual acting out, the depression, the anxiety, the psychosomatic disorders, stomach ache, backache, stress aches, so on. And so basically I wouldn't have any more patients. That would not be a bad thing.
If parents did what they really were supposed to do in a perfect world,
Right.
and they really invested the time, effort, energy as a parent with an infant, then their lives as well as the child's lives later in life would be a whole lot better.
Absolutely. And again, this is a system, and the system consists of a trickle down. So
Yes.
we've got
and
the
many times
pillars.
it's multi-generational.
Totally multi-generational. Mother and father are the pillars, and if mother and father didn't have very good pillars in their family of origin, then they trickle down into pathology. And so the system is that the father plays a really important role, or the male energy, as we're talking about, one being the primary, the other being the secondary parent has to support the nurturer. We need to nurture the nurturer so that that person can then trickle down the emotional goodies to the infant, which is not an easy job.
No, parenting isn't for wimps.
No.
And the one thing that I always talk about, and I think it's good to put in perspective from the child's perspective, which I mentioned last week, is children are like just sponges. They don't know, so they're going to be just soaking everything in. And along those lines, they're little scientists. You know, sometimes they don't know what happens when you take that little tiny Tonka truck, drop it in a toilet, and flush it down the toilet. They don't know.
But they're about to find out
and
when
yes,
they do.
Mommy, daddy, and the child is about ready to find out. So you have to be careful. Or if you take a crayon and you draw on the wall, what happens, right? Or last week we alluded to maybe you take the roll of toilet paper and you just want to pull it and see how far it will go, whether it'll go in all the rooms, it'll go downstairs. So, you know, they're just little scientists and sponges to soak stuff up. They don't know.
And it's a great idea to provide a space, a safe enough space where your children can be those little scientists and experiment, and give them a roll of toilet paper and allow them to see how the bathroom toilet flushes, and let them jump off the couch onto the floor. And as long as they're not getting stitches and breaking legs and so on, you know, slicing open their head on glass
Furniture.
countertops, whatever, then do let your child be exposed to the consequences of making decisions that don't serve them.
Because that's what our jobs are as parents. Judy has 2 sons. I have 2 daughters, and they're all 20s and 30s. And so, and Judy's actually a grandparent too.
Yeah, that's
She's
the best.
She's got a grandson. So
and he teaches me a lot about parenting, which I'll share.
And as I say, raising parents is really hard work. But I remember I had one client who was just lamenting about the fact that in the closet at his house, and he'd spent all this money, was a basketball, a baseball, a football, hockey, tennis, you know, bowling ball, all these different sports that he had introduced his child to that they didn't like. And I looked at him, I said, that's what we're supposed to do as parents. We're supposed to be introducing them to things so they know what they like and what they don't like, but they're not going to know until they've exposed it to it and experienced it.
Right. And one of the things we mentioned last time is the authoritative parent.
Where we did an article on, I'd like to send these to you if you'd like, authoritative versus authoritarian.
And liberal or laissez-faire.
Well, no, then the 4 parenting styles was those 2, and then we had permissive and uninvolved.
Uninvolved.
Yeah,
And
we talked about those last week.
Right, and guess which children turned out, or which set of children turned out?
Well, yeah, it's really a mess. But and by all counts, the authoritative is the most balanced and the most one. You're really giving your kids more. You're giving them a little respect.
And structure. Without being authoritarian.
You're assertive without intrusive and restrictive. Okay? You're supportive rather than punitive. Right. And so parents respond to their child and willing to listen to questions, and parents are more nurturing and forgiving than punishing. I mean, you're the parent, and as I talked last week, authoritative versus authoritarian, it's really when you're talking about being feared or revered.
I like that.
Yeah, a big difference.
And it's such a huge topic in my practice. Parents come to me and they want to do the right thing, and sometimes they don't have role models where they're taught the right skills for parenting, so they're kind of lost in the woods, and then they themselves get frustrated because sometimes having children brings up your own issues of not being nurtured. Brings up having parents that didn't soothe you. So how are you supposed to soothe children when you don't even know how to soothe yourself? So what happens oftentimes is that the frustrated parents are going to project on each other, or they will scapegoat one of their children, and neither one of these systems works. So we have to get a better system in place, and in order to do that, we have to heal the parents' childhood wounds so they're in better shape to parent, and then give them the skill sets that they never learned. So again, trickle down, breaking multi-generational
But
patterns.
it starts with realizing that, hey, you know what? This isn't working.
Correct.
I need some help, and we can't do it ourselves.
Right.
And we have to look in the mirror and realize, okay, I need help. And that is where we come in.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Dr. Judy comes in with the Psychological Healing Center, because if you can hear her voice, you can hear our voice, then you can call in. We can do therapy on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
She does therapy on Skype and, of course, in person. And she has a staff of therapists who can help assist also on a sliding scale. So pretty much we can assist and help anybody who really realizes they need some help. And then, of course, while you're doing that, you want to download the app on your iPhone, which is Psychological Healing Center, and you can have a lot more resources as well.
And a lot of people think that if they bring in their damaged child, that child will heal. And I say, no, we've got to get to the family system.
The source.
So the child is actually a really good feedback source on how you're doing as parents. Because if you have a child that's acting out, if you have a child that's psychosomatic, if you have a child who exhibits severe symptoms or even mild, moderate symptoms, then you know that as parents, we're the cause. And I didn't say fault.
No. Correct.
Okay, and the better that we can heal as parents, the better that we can generate effective systems for our children, the better they're going to be able to pass down these skill sets to their children. So, no, you can't take a child, heal the child, and then throw the child back into a dysfunctional system. You've got to get to the cause, which is the system itself.
I'm sure you've seen it where parents come in and they go fix the child and leave.
All the time.
Yeah.
Of course.
My sister is a child psychologist, and it's like all the time.
And we do have people on staff that work with the children, but at the same time, we also have to be working with the parents, because sometimes children do need a therapist to be a role model, because oftentimes daddy's missing or mommy's missing, or one of the parents are so dysfunctional that they can't really function as that parent.
And one of the definitions I have of a children that I mentioned was God's little spies.
Mm-hmm.
This is a call-in show, so if you want to talk about your little spy or yourself or a parenting challenge or issue, you can call in. Our number is area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. And go ahead.
No, I wanted to get into, and I know you're going to get into this topic, the topic of timeout.
Right.
And,
last week we
yes.
talked about the 7 things, and we only got to 3. Spanking, timeouts, yelling, put-downs, losing privileges, grounding, and forcing an apology. So last week we touched on spanking, which is basically discipline versus abuse, and what that was. Then we talked about losing privileges, so you can go check the previous show. And timeouts is our third one we were going to talk about.
So what are the other professionals
Well, a
say
timeout
about
say,
timeout?
but not all timeouts are created equal, right? The idea for is to take a choice, make him a choice. When it's over, we discuss why he was put in a timeout and could do it differently. Some say that if you want to do a timeout, you might want to do it for 1 minute per age of child.
Interesting.
So in other words, if they're 3 years old, they're really only going to handle 3 minutes. If they're 7 years old, maybe 7 minutes, maybe 10 minutes tops.
So here's what I'm thinking, and I love the concept of self-reflect and self-correct. And as children get older, their cognitive ability increases, and so their behavior hopefully will be structured more around the do the right thing versus I don't want to be punished and I want to avoid the punishment, which is a lower level thinking.
Yeah, and you also
it's a more
mentioned you were
primitive
punishing
level
the
thinking,
activity
not the child.
as opposed to the child, which I think is a
Right.
tremendous difference.
Right. So you never blame, shame, criticize, judge your child. You might say, little Betty, when you leave your toys out, it stresses mommy and daddy out, because then we have to clean up after you.
Or we're stepping on them and hurting our toes, or they might get broken because they're going to get kicked.
Right, and I think that what people underestimate is their children's ability to understand. And I'm doing more and more, really kind of observing my own grandson, and he's 3 years old, and it's amazing how much he will understand. So when he hits me, I'll say to him, Alexander, does grandma hit you? And he'll say, no. Alexander, are you, and then he'll say, are you angry at me? And then I'll say, I don't want to be angry at you, and I don't like it when you hit me. So let's talk about it. So we'll actually have a very short conversation about it because he can't go into depth about it.
No, because he's 3 years old.
So I'll just ask him, are you angry at Grandma? And sometimes he'll say, yeah, I'm angry at Grandma. Why? Because I want ice cream. And then I'll say, okay, you can have ice cream. And they're negotiable with. You can have ice cream after you eat dinner. Good. And oftentimes he'll go along with it and just say good. So he understands the process of my thinking. And he's also very, very concerned that I don't dislike him. He's actually invested in my not disliking him.
Acceptance.
And he's very open to what can he do differently so that it's a win-win situation. So I think that you can start really early in asking children how they're feeling and then connecting the dots for them so that they understand that hitting hurts or leaving toys out can stab somebody's toes or whatever the consequence. And that's what you do is you keep connecting the dots, but you never blame, shame, or criticize the child. Only dealing with the behavior.
Yeah, again, we're doing the behavior, not the individual who's done the behavior.
Correct.
Because it says here, in terms of we have 3 experts here that kind of chime in terms of these issues. If the child calms down, then it's going to think about what happened. Timeouts immediately remove from the misbehavior and ask to sit down quietly and think about their actions.
And that's the key. Think about, because the mind is the cooling system of the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions are heated. They come from a primitive place like the amygdala, and the mind cools it down.
So ultimately what we're doing is we're teaching a replacement behavior.
Right.
So again, it's the behavior, not the child that's doing the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Next is grounding. The term grounding, you might think that teenagers are forced to stay home for breaking the curfew. I thought it was really cool because I'd go to my room, I'd read, it was great. Although I never got grounded. I was a good kid. No, seriously.
So you were a great kid.
I was. So if it's like losing privileges, grounding works. The child misses something he cares about. Otherwise, it's worthless.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I wasn't a big deal on TV. My parents were big on this anyway, privileges. But, my sister just loved watching TV. It's a crack up. Mm-hmm. So extended periods can backfire because if it's too long, then it kind of loses its impact and it's now gone into something else. So it has no place in a positive discipline approach, one says. So he says toss it. So if like for example, if children are continuing fighting, there was a cool off period, and that's really going to be better in terms of the behavior than grounding the child that's doing it.
And, there is a dialogue that I created called the Peaceful Healing Dialogue. And when your children are old enough to use the Peaceful Healing Dialogue, you can teach it to them. And the Peaceful Healing Dialogue includes self-reflection and self-correction. So, Mom, I get it. So are you saying that when I leave my toys out, it stresses you out because you have to clean up after me, and then it takes time away from us having fun and doing the game? That's exactly what I'm saying. Oh, I get it now. So if I clean up, we'll have more time to have fun together. Yep.
And Mommy feels better because
it's win-win.
There's not toys everywhere, right?
It's win-win, right.
The next one is a big one, I think, and one I've seen a lot of. It's yelling. Mm-hmm. What impact does that do? Okay. If you grow up in a house of screamers, you turn up the volume on the kids as well. Again, they emulate what they see. So why do we blow up instead of just start staying mellow? We yell because we can, because we feel our children don't listen, because we're angry and the lack of tools to call on in the moment. So, and it's ultimately about not being heard.
Right.
Okay.
Or being misunderstood.
Right, being misunderstood,
right?
or being heard.
People will
Correct.
raise their voice because they don't feel like they're being heard. The problem is that once they start escalating, they're not going to be heard because they're pushing the other person into panel number 5, which is defenses.
And usually if it's done enough, the kid will just shut it off, and that's the end of it.
Right, and the person they're yelling at won't be open to the communication because they just want to run from the yelling and shut that down. So that doesn't work.
And it's also a cycle of a trap. In other words, if the child knows that you don't mean business until you yell, then you're going to resort to yelling. So they're going to wait for the yelling to make sure you really mean business, right? So backing off to cool off doesn't mean you're giving up for good. Okay?
Right.
So it's just not really kosher and doesn't really work, but because it just tells the kids, okay, mom's really pissed now. Now we've really got our dad really got to do this. So, you got to find other ways to communicate that I really mean business without raising
And
the
it's
voice.
another way of modeling lack of impulse control, because what behavior is all about is controlling your impulses, right? And if the parent is yelling, then they may be saying, control yourself, but what are you going to hear? The words or the way the words are impacting? You can't yell, control yourself in an out of control way. It doesn't make sense, right? Because you're basically contradicting yourself.
It's incongruent.
Correct.
Exactly. Two more here. One is forcing an apology. Basically, you're grudgingly muttering, I'm sorry, or such and such. Really, does that work? Actually, no.
No,
Because it's not genuine.
Because you can't just wipe the slate clean by saying I'm sorry. Again, back to a better way, which is to own your own issues.
Stuff.
So when you self-reflect and then you can correct out of that, that's powerful, and that cleans the slate. When you're just whitewashing with, oh, I'm sorry. First of all, you've demonstrated that you've learned nothing, okay? Because I'm sorry doesn't really show the other party that you've thought about it and that you've considered them and their feelings, or you've considered your behavior and its impact. You want to be teaching your children cause effect, not just taking an eraser and erasing it. That's not learning.
You've nailed it on the head. One of them says forcing an apology is like begging for a compliment. Okay? If you have to beg for a compliment, is it really a compliment?
Yeah.
Nope, not really. Genuine sentiment is lacking and the lesson is lost. So, and they say just really isn't appropriate in any age. And lastly, we have put downs, which we've talked a lot about and mentioned. And obviously, you can imagine it's not too kosher either. If a parent finds himself resorting to ridicule, guilt, shame, and humiliation, they're likely to pick the habit up from their parents. I find myself using phrases like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you act like your sister or your brother or the other children? Says one mom.
And there's the seed for sibling rivalry.
Yep.
Right there.
Yep. I'm sure this does nothing for my son's self-esteem. It's just making him angry and aggressive. And I know how that's felt. So doesn't work.
Not to mention what it does to the relationship between the two, the sister, brother, the siblings, right? And so when you see a lot of sibling rivalry, the crazy part is the parents are going to punish the children for acting out on each other, and the sad thing is that they don't realize that they're the cause. Okay, because now they've compared the children, and they've made one feel like they're special and the other one they've thrown under the bus. And so what can they expect? Now they can expect the two children to love each other.
Doesn't work. And if you're just tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Dr. Judy, WTF, which is What the Freud, here on UBN Radio Network here in Hollywood. I'm Walt Lusk, your host, and we have Dr. Judy Rosenberg, who is the founder of the Psychological Healing Center in Sherman Oaks, Beverly Hills, and the world. Because if you can hear our voice, we can do the mind map therapy with you on Skype or on the telephone, of course, and in person. And now, for those of you who have an iPhone, for free, you can download the app Psychological Healing Center, and it's an amazing resource for Dr. Judy. There's clips from her book in there. It alludes to our our radio show here, and other resources.
Oh, I forgot. Yes, you can read portions of the book right on the app and get a feel for it. And then if you like it, you can order
Human
it
Disconnect.
right there. You could order it through the app.
And it's a cool way to communicate and stay in touch. Let alone when you go watch us on YouTube, you can like us or subscribe us, I should say, and you'll be alerted to new shows. And you can also pull us on podcasts on Stitcher and iTunes as well.
And
also
we want to thank our listeners for listening. We want to thank our listeners for the wonderful comments.
Absolutely.
And even the not wonderful comments, because we need feedback. We're
Either
totally
way, it's all
open
good.
to honest, rigorous feedback, because we want to be better and better and serve our audience with as much information as we can. So if you have any particular requests, please let us know. Write us at
info@drjudywtf.
Thank you.
And .com. and we respond to anything and everything. Whether you want some notes for the show, you have an idea for a show, because these are topic driven, and we love to get ideas, because Judy and I sometimes rack our brains what we're going to do next week, and of course a song to shrink.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you want to touch on daycare. I know it's a big, big issue, and you mentioned you want to talk about it, and maybe it's been an issue some of your patients.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going next is, the
Thank you.
dilemma of daycare.
Well, okay, here's where I'm going to go with this. Dr. John Bowlby, father of attachment theory. Certainly no daycare in the first, definitely not in the first few months of life to a year. No way. You have to understand that in order to form a healthy human psyche, you've got to be there as parents. And there's only one attachment figure, a primary caregiver, that the baby will attach to, primarily. Okay? So yes, there could be grandma helping. Yes, there could be a nanny helping. Yes, there could be a dad helping. Yes, there could be a babysitter that you bring into the house helping. I'm not saying, Mom or Dad, that you can't take a breath without your child.
Yes,
That's ridiculous.
It's not exclusive.
It could be. It can go too far. And remember the concept of nurture the nurturer. Everyone out there who's a mother, and I'm a mother, needs a break. Okay, but during the first few weeks, first few months of life, take a lot of breaks. Make them short. So when baby's napping, try to get your shower in. When baby's taking nap number 2, try to
take a nap.
Take a nap too.
Yeah, take a nap with
maybe
them.
nap number 3. Make some phone calls to your friends, or go out for a walk and have somebody else, if you can afford it, be with the child. Now, I also want to address working mothers, because there are a lot of people out there that are listening thinking, Dr. Judy, come on, be real, I have to work. I get it, okay? I get it. You have to work. If you have to work, if you have no choice about it, then you want to get one attachment figure that will be in that child's life for the first few years of life. If you're going to have a nanny, make sure that that nanny isn't fired, okay? Because the last thing that you want is for your child to attach to that nanny and then be rid of the nanny. And believe me, that child is going to go into a grief period.
Yes,
so that you don't want to create that.
Yeah.
And again, if you do the math, because sometimes the child care and the nannies and so on cost as much money as you're making after taxes. So really think about it.
Well, and also when you're working, you've got to maybe dry clean your clothes. You've got wear and tear and gas on the car.
Correct.
You've got lunches out.
Right. So in an ideal situation, you want to be a stay-at-home mom, and you want to gradually give yourself and your child more and more time away. And then the next step might be, like play school or something?
Oh, they have
daycare,
like play dates?
Play dates,
Yeah.
a daycare where there are other children.
Yes.
And don't just drop the kid off the first day. Stay there with your child. Let your child check back to see that you're there. And then as they get attached to the other children and the teachers, then you can start leaving for an hour and then coming back. And then what you want to do is you want to build tolerance. You don't want to suddenly attack children with having to manage too much of their emotions, because they can't do it. And in the book I talk about this, but I have a very dear friend in Toronto, Dr. Annie Green, who had to travel a lot when her child was young, and she had a technique called push mommy out the door. So the child was, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years old, was very upset about mommy leaving, so she turned it around and gave him the locus of control. So every time she was about to leave, they would go through this game, and the teachers got involved, the daycare providers got involved, and the technique was, let's push mommy out the door. So the kid felt that he was in charge of mommy leaving, so he didn't have to feel like he was being abandoned.
Wow.
He was telling her to go, and it worked really, really well.
Well, one thing here in this article is just real quick here is daycare does not mean, for instance, its goal is to disrupt the child-mother attachment bond. It's meant to really complement it, and it can be done, and it can be done well, and it can be done right. You know, in a perfect world, you're talking a few hours, okay? Maybe, well, I think one article I read, it was like 20 hours a week, okay? Now, granted, you know, most folks work 40, so you're talking about the fact that you're away from your child, but it's, you know, relatively speaking, it's not all day.
And there's a formula for it.
Yeah.
If you go to attachment parenting and look up the information, they have it pretty down. When your child is this many months old, you can be away from the child for this long. And if he or she is 1 year old, you can be away from the child for that long, and so on. But what you don't do is give birth to a baby and then take off on a vacation.
Oh, absolutely
for,
not. 2 weeks.
Even a few days.
Yeah.
It's just because they don't have concept of time. It's just in their mind, it's way too long. They have no ability to soothe themselves. So they need mom to perform that function for them.
And that's how children spell love when they're younger. And I don't know if you know this one. Yeah, I've said it before. Children spell love when they're really, really young. T-I-M-E.
Right.
Right? Because that's all they know. Mommy's there, daddy's there, we're a family. You know, where'd they go? Now, do they love me? No, they feel a bit abandoned. I know it's a give and take thing, but it can work out.
And let's not forget the role of the father, because the more the father supports the mother, the better job she can do at the mothering job. So that means that father attunes to the mother, and if she's really tired, he can rub her neck or get her some food so that she can breastfeed. Draw her bath, or give her a break and let her go off to the gym while dad sits at home and cares for the baby. So the point is, we're human beings. We can't put the load on any one person. Moms, even though we talk a lot about attachment theory, that doesn't mean that you don't get to take breaks to keep your sanity, because you do have to, as we've said on many shows, put the oxygen mask on first so that you're okay.
Right.
When you're okay, your baby's okay.
They're going to feel it. They're going to see
feel
it. They're going to know it.
That doesn't mean that it's okay to take a vacation for a week because you're tired, because that already impedes on the newborns or the infants' emotional well-being.
It's actually the first year of life, which is the most critical, right? The first year of life is more critical than the care, you know, later on. The emotional, social, and intellectual development of the children in the first year of life is so protected by biological design, it's hard to get it off any permanent way other than, you know, you got to spend time with the kid. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
And separation has to come in stages,
Yes.
because if you are always there for your child 24/7 and you never let that child experience any distress, then that child can become a clingy child. It's called smothering.
Yep.
Okay. On the other hand, if you don't give them enough soothing, then they can become very anxious and emotionally distressed. So it's kind of like the three little bears and the three chairs. You can't give them too little and you can't smother them, but somehow in there you have to kind of feel out and study and understand what's going to be best for the entire system.
I want to touch on a little bit some assumptions. There's 5 here that I've picked, and actually there's an article you did about bottles, diapers, cribs, strollers, and that kind of thing in terms of bonding. And the first one is, if you don't breastfeed your baby, you can't bond with them. Because there's a whole La Leche League that really talks about it. Now, granted, breast milk is the best thing for the baby. It's cheaper because mommy's making it, and it's most healthy. But in some instances, it just can't be done. And they're basically saying the bottom line, if you have any comments on this, is, you know, it's obviously the best for it, but if you can't and you sit there and you bottle nurture the child, they're still getting the eye contact, the skin, the connection, and it's just as effective.
And what you don't want to do is prop a pillow under your infant's chin and have them face away from you while you're watching television or you're on the cell phone.
Yes.
That's not it.
Yes.
If you want to hold your infant and gaze into your infant's eyes and feel the infant against your breast, against your skin, and you're not breastfeeding for whatever reason, you can still give that contact comfort to the infant.
One thing I heard a long time ago is when babies are born, their eyesight is only good for about, I don't know, like 18 inches or 2 feet or something, which is about the distance between the baby breastfeeding and mom's face.
And there's a lot of learning going on
Yeah.
because when you have that eye contact, first of all, the baby's learning facial expressions, bonding to mother's sense of smell and look and sound of her voice and the heartbeat. And all of that is really important in optimizing neurological functioning, because the more the connection, the more the connectivity in the brain, the more the amygdala, which is the emotional brain, calms down, and the less distress your infant will be experiencing.
The next one, real quick, is stroller versus baby wearing. You know, you see all these babies that are being carried. Well, again, the conventional wisdom is it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Other than if you're carrying your child, you're just going to bust your back
Yeah,
and get tired.
You don't want to do that.
And it's just a lot of hassles.
Right.
As long as you're there, you're there, there's a connection, you're together, whether it's in a stroller or not, it's really works just the same. If you're full, and we've talked about this one already, if you're a full-time, part-time parent and use a sitter, it's really okay because the sitter is there to augment, because you're still the parent, as long as, again, Dr. Judy's mentioned, take a 10-day cruise away and abandon the child. So, someone's to create a real bond and trust and develop a relationship, and that's really the key.
Yeah, you don't want to fire your nanny.
You do not.
And so you want to pick your nanny really carefully, and sometimes it's best if the nanny does other functions while you do the main mothering function. Like the nanny can change the diapers, let's say, or make the baby food, or help you to make a sandwich or make your bed and do other errands while you're as much as possible with the child. So I think there's a way to do this where there's a balance, and that's the key is a balance.
And
so nobody loses
right.
it in the process.
Yep. And then lastly, I want to talk, it's co-sleeping. Some feel it's, the baby sleeps in the bed. And I know there's a whole argument, it's pros and cons. The bottom line here is sometimes, it's kind of tough because, it's like, sometimes some tiny toes are going to be shoved into your eye. It's just not really conducive for your sleep. And obviously if mom and dad don't get enough sleep, it kind of is a challenge. So they're kind of saying that if you don't sleep with your child, you're not connected enough. And the conventional wisdom, at least in this particular article, is basically saying, I disagree. I mean, my children didn't sleep in our bed because my argument was this is mommy and daddy's bed. I mean, they came in periodically on occasion, but they knew that, they had their own time and space, and it worked for us.
And again, it's a balance.
Yes.
When my children were infants, they did sleep with me because I could then breastfeed them on demand, which is how I chose to do it. And then you could put a little bassinet right next to you. So if you want to get some stretched out sleep, you could just put the baby right next to you. And again,
we had bassinets.
Again, you don't want to go too far, because if, the Ferber method, let your baby cry it out. You don't let your infant cry it out because they don't have the capacity to hold their little emotions. But as they get older and older, you want to wean them off of instant gratification. So slowly but surely you help them contain their little emotions, but it's not a radical change. So you may wait a minute or two before you pick them up as they get older and older. And certainly, you're not going to be picking up a 5-year-old child every time they cry, right? But a newborn infant or a 2 or 3 month old or even a 6 month old, you need to be a little bit more attentive to the infants and young children.
There was an article that we don't have time to talk about real quick and just touch on was the Dr. Sears method, which is the exact opposite. The kids cries, you immediately go and pay attention to them. And the bottom line is this one mother wrote this article that she did that, and it was a disaster because the child couldn't separate themselves enough from mom.
Well, maybe Dr. Sears, and I don't know much about him, but again, it's this gradual approximation. It's this gradual weaning off schedule where you've got to allow your children a little space to have what we call in our profession frustration tolerance, but you don't expose a brand new infant to too much frustration. But you can expose a 6-month-old child to a little bit of frustration, and a 1-year-old child to a little more frustration. So again, this is kind of like a building the child's ability to tolerate system.
So it's kind of like a little bit of a give and take.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you can't be there all the time for them, and so they've got to learn it on their own. But
And
it's age appropriate.
Right.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, queries, comments, concerns, you want to get on the couch with Dr. Judy, you can call us. And next week we'll have another show. We're going to do our segment now in Shrink That Tune, where we take a popular song. I'm going to read the lyrics, and Dr. Judy is going to shrink it from a mind map psychological perspective. And the song we've selected, actually was by request, was Lee Ann Womack's I Hope You Dance. I hope you never lose your sense of wonder. You get your fill to eat, but always keep that hunger. May you never take one single breath for granted. God forbid love ever leave you empty-handed.
Well, speaking of attachment theory, okay, this is a woman singing, Leanne Womack. And so I think that when children have the basics of this attachment, and they get to fill up their bellies, okay, then they can go out in the world and they can explore, and then they can start wondering because their basic needs are met.
Yes. I hope you still feel small when you stand beside the ocean. Whenever one door closes, I hope one more opens. Promise me that you'll give faith a fighting chance, and when you get the chance to sit it out, or dance, I hope you dance. I hope you dance.
So I hear a mother saying, don't lose your childlike qualities. And she's saying, I'm here. I'm an adult. I get to hold you and protect you. And so even though there's this great big ocean, you can still feel small because mommy's here. I'll protect you. This is a really beautiful, protective mother that wants her child to have a sense of wonderment and a sense of joy to dance.
I hope you never fear those mountains in a distance. Never settle for the path of least resistance. Livin' might make taken chances, but they're worth takin'. Lovin' might make a mistake, but it's worth makin'. Don't let some hell-bent heart leave you bitter. When you come close to sellin' out, reconsider. Give the heavens above more than just a passing glance. And when you get the chance to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance.
Well, again, she's saying that you're safe, okay? Safe attachment creates children who are able to take bigger risks and go out there in the world and climb bigger mountains and take a little bit more of a path untaken. Basically, what healthy attachment does is it allows your children to be exploratory. And so she's speaking to that. She's saying, I'm here, you're safe, go explore, go dance, and don't worry because you have a mommy that's internally within you as a solid attachment figure. And so even though other people may break your heart, well, don't let that keep you bitter because I put the love inside of you. So you're free to dance.
I hope you still feel small when you stand beside the ocean. Whenever one door opens, I hope one more closes. Promise me that you'll give faith a fighting chance, and when you get the chance to sit it out or dance, dance. I hope you dance.
Okay, so still she wants that child to be able to be in wonderment and to be able to feel small and enjoy feeling small. Whenever one door closes, I hope one more opens. So she's offering her child hope, and she's saying, don't worry if things don't work out exactly. There are going to be new opportunities.
Right. There's always more coming just around the bend.
Right, and that's because the child is secure. The child is not living in what we call the double dungeon of darkness. She's in the light, and she can dance.
And so that is I Hope You Dance by Leanne Womack. And that's our shrunk song for here, Dr. Judy WTF. If you have any queries, questions, you want to hear more, just write us at info@drjudywtf.com, or you can actually go to iPhone and download the app on the App Store on your iPhone, the Psychological Healing Center. It's a cool little light green little icon, and it's got excerpts from the book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, which is available on Amazon in paperback and on Kindle, and soon to be on Nook if it isn't already at Barnes & Noble. Is it there yet?
And you can order it right off of the app.
And you can order off the app, or
Right.
you can go to drjudywtf.com and order it as well. It's a great book. In fact, there's a favorite section of mine after every chapter that Dr. Judy put in, and it teaches you how to think like a shrink. So that's our song. I'm Walt Lusk, your host, with Dr. Judy WTF, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg. We're going to close out with our song. Until next time, God bless everyone.